So now that we have 100 subs on YouTube, I want to show you all the story of my very first Commander deck. So I first started playing the game in August of 2015, and later that next month in September, Battle for Zendikar came out. And as I've said before on this channel, I love the allies from that set. And so naturally, my very first Commander deck that I wanted to play with was an ally tribal deck. And I was considering a few different commanders for it. I considered Corona False God just because she's 5-color and she's very silly, and I'd seen Dave McDarby play a 5-color Corona deck. But my friends persuaded me to not go for her just because it would be... a 5-color is really, really hard to play, especially if you're new. My friends persuaded me to try Alesha, Who Smiles at Death, who had just came out the year before or earlier that year. I can't remember when Fate Reforged came out. Alesha is 2 in red for a 3/2 warrior with first strike, and whenever she attacks, you can pay 2 and return something with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped and attacking. She's not a bad ally commander for the time. You know, this was before Oath of the Gatewatch came out. Alesha has a lot of synergy with allies because lots of them have power 2 or less, so she has lots of targets if you have stuff in the graveyard. But since she's not an ally herself, the deck just kind of had to rely on drawing allies naturally. So it was kind of mid. It was not a great deck. There wasn't really a whole lot to it. I also remember running things like Ankle Shanker because it had come out. I traded away my Jace Vryn's Prodigy and my Hangerback Walker for a lot of staples that my friend had, like Lightning Greaves, like Sacred Foundry, the red-white Shockland. It taught me a few lessons that decks are usually more than the sum of their parts. You know, if all of your cards in your deck are synergistic with each other, you know, all allies make everything better, and everything's geared towards one game plan, that's usually a sign of good deck building. Unfortunately, if your theme is too niche, you're not really going to have a whole lot of support for it, and you're going to have to get really creative with your choices. I could still run things like March from the Tomb and other ally payoff cards, but otherwise I kind of had to get creative with how I would close out games. I do remember having a Kythian from Magic Origins as well, but otherwise there wasn't really anything powerful at all in that deck. There were a few lessons that I learned playing Alesha, and that's to read your cards very carefully. I remember running Immortal Servitude, and that says to return everything with mana value X to your graveyard to the battlefield, and I misread that as saying X or less. So I was like, oh, this card's great. But no, it's not March from the Tomb. It's very, very niche. I also remember playing Night of the White Orchid, and I thought they could grab any white land from that deck, but no, you can only grab things that say plains. So I could only grab like Sacred Foundry or Godless Shrine or something that just says plains. So yeah, I learned using that deck to just read everything carefully and make sure everything is geared towards one game plan. I did have my very first victory using this deck, luckily. I would eventually dismantle Alesha just because it wasn't really what I was looking for. It just wasn't very strong, and allies at that time were a little bit more niche. Once Oath of the Gatewatch came out, there would be a lot more support for allies, especially because General Tazri was now a thing. So I would eventually rebuild Alesha into Tazri as a 5-color ally tribal deck, but Alesha just kind of had its time in the sun and then went. But I did achieve my first victory using that deck, and the first time I ever won a Commander game was exciting, and it was also kind of a relief. It kind of showed to myself that I could actually like hang with the big boys, but ultimately it was just more evidence that I was just kind of getting the hang of Magic. It wasn't that I was like better than anyone or anything like that. Magic is a really complicated game, and everyone was playing more tuned down decks to fit Alesha. It was more just to show myself that I had grown in the first few months of me playing the game, that I had learned a lot, and that I was actually having fun. You know, being able to compete with everyone else and actually win a game was really, really fun. And to do it with my own deck, it showed me that I could actually have fun with this game and actually like make more of a hobby out of this. So yeah, it definitely built my confidence up a lot. I guess one of the main takeaways that I take from Alesha is that sometimes you build a deck and it's not really what you want. You know, you kind of play it and you realize the weaknesses of it, the strengths, and what you like about it, what you don't like. And sometimes when you build a deck, it's just kind of not for you. Whether that's the theme is too niche and there isn't really a whole lot of room for growth for it, or it's just not really your playstyle, or what have you. And for Alesha, with me, Ally Tribal wasn't really where it needed to be in the game yet. And it really wasn't super competitive yet, and I wanted to build something more strong, more powerful. And I would end up doing both really soon after. I soon after built a really strong red-white deck, and I built another ally tribal deck soon after with Oath of the Gatewatch. So yeah, what was your first commander deck in Magic? Was it a pre-con, or did you build it yourself? Let me know. And just remember, it's not about the magic, it's about smiling in the face of adversity.